It's time for my annual Chicago Bears mock offseason where I'll be going through trades, cuts, the NFL draft, free agency, everything the Bears will be doing this offseason. I'll be mocking in this video right here. What's going on, guys? I'm back with another Chicago Bears update video, discussion video. I'm sorry this video is out a lot later than I usually put it out. It's because I had surgery a week ago, so I wasn't able to get it out last weekend, but doing well now, so I recorded it this weekend. And this is going to be a very long video, obviously, as you guys can see by the timestamp. So I would recommend getting a drink, getting a snack, sitting back and relaxing, because there's going to be a lot of content in this video right here. But basically what I'll be doing in this video is going through every single part of the Bears offseason and give you guys my educated guess on what the Bears could do. Now, we've had 3 seasons of Ryan Poles' leadership now, so we have a good idea of how he operates usually in free agency, in the NFL draft, the types of players he goes after. But things could be a little bit different this year, judging by some of his comments about free agency before the combine started. Okay, so for the NFL combine, obviously they have a media session with all the GMs and the coaches, but Ryan Poles said like he would be aggressive for the right player in free agency if that player checks all the boxes. Now, unfortunately, Trey Smith is not going to be available. I think that was one of the players that would have checked all boxes and he could have been our big slam dunk signing of the all season, but he's not available, sadly, because he got franchise tagged. But at this point, Ryan Poles needs to prove he can build a winning roster. There's already a lot of very talented pieces on the Chicago Bears. If you look at the receiver room, if you look at the quarterback, Caleb Williams, if you look at the cornerback room, even guys like Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson, there's a lot of talent on this Bears roster, but what we lack is talent in the trenches. Okay, so that's going to be the theme of the entire mock offseason, building up the trenches, building up the offensive line, building up the defensive line, because football is won and lost in those trenches, as we saw in the Super Bowl last year. The Eagles won because they dominated in the trenches, and that's the area where the Bears have to get a lot better. The Bears kind of built their roster from the outside in, when in reality oftentimes they should be building the trenches first. But regardless, the Bears have a lot of resources this offseason to build the trenches, so it can still work out, even if it was done a little bit backwards, in my opinion. So in this video, guys, all the contract projections will be from PFF. PFF usually is pretty accurate with their contract projections, so I'm using their projections for most of these contracts I'm giving out in free agency. And also the link to the spreadsheet I'm using to help me make this video is going to be linked down below. It's on tapsportsnet.com. Quentin Crisco is the one that made this, so definitely shoot him a follow if you can, because he spent a lot of time to make the spreadsheet where he can, just input the various cuts and the signings, and it does all the math for you in regards to the salary cap, because that would take a long time to do yourself. So shout out to him for making the spreadsheet. But enough talking, guys. Let's get on with the video. So to start out the offseason, we have $64,583,943 to spend this year, but let's make our cuts first of all. So the first guy I'll be cutting, which already happened in real life, is cutting tight end Gerald Everett. Cutting him saved the Bears $5.5 million. I honestly forgot that Gerald Everett was even on the team last year. That's how little production he had. He barely had any targets, any catches in this offense. It was pretty hard to even find a picture of him doing anything on this team for this video, because that's how little he was used by Shane Waldron. So a pretty bad signing by Ryan Poles, but also didn't help that his offensive coordinator Shane Waldron had no idea how to use the tight ends in the scheme. So I wish him the best of luck, but it clearly did not work out here in Chicago, so it's a pretty easy decision to cut him. Next, I'm cutting defensive end DeMarcus Walker, because this also happened already in real life. Cutting him saved the Bears $5.25 million. Now, this I probably would not have done myself, because I thought it made more sense to keep him as depth on this team. He was a pretty good leader in the locker room, pretty decent as a backup defensive end, but clearly Ryan Poles and Dennis Allen have a different direction they want to go in, and I especially value the input from Dennis Allen. I'm sure this move would not have been made without the approval of Dennis Allen. He clearly wants somebody else to fit into the scheme, so I'm not going to complain too much about it. You can definitely find backup defensive ends in the NFL draft or in free agency. I'm also cutting defensive end Dominique Robinson. Cutting him saves the Bears $1.1 million. It's about time the Bears move on from Dominique Robinson. He was a project pick that Ryan Poles made in the 5th round of his first draft ever, and the project failed. Okay, Dominique Robinson is not an NFL caliber player in year 4 now. There's been no production besides his first game ever in the NFL, so I think it's about time the Bears cut ties. So those are the major cuts, but also be cutting some other players at the bottom of this roster for simplicity's sake right now, when in reality, these players will be getting cut after training camp because you're allowed to have a 90-man roster, but eventually you have to get it down to 53 men. So in real life, these cuts will be happening a little bit later, but I'm doing it right now just to make it a little bit easier. And some of these guys will be coming back on practice squad, probably. So I'll be cutting edge rusher Jamry Chroma, offensive guard Chris Glazer, offensive guard Jordan McFadden, quarterback Austin Reed, safety Elijah Hicks, safety Alex Cook, tight end Joel Wilson, tight end Jordan Murray, wide receiver John Jackson, and running back Ian Wheeler. Now, as mentioned, some of these guys will be coming back on practice squad, guys like Austin Reed, guys like John Jackson, Ian Wheeler. I would expect some of these guys to come back on the practice squad. So after all the cuts, we have about $85,711,443 to spend in free agency, but let's begin by re-signing some of our own players. The first guy I'll be re-signing is edge rusher Daryl Taylor to a 1-year, $3.4 million contract. The Bears traded a 6th-round pick for Daryl Taylor, and he definitely lived up to the 6th-round pick and then some. It was a pretty good trade by Ryan Poles. Even though Daryl Taylor only had 3 sacks last year, he did have 31 pressures, had 2 forced fumbles, had 23 solo tackles. He made some big-time plays early in the season. I think with a better defensive line around him, he could really thrive in that backup role, so it makes sense to sign him back. The next guy I'm re-signing is linebacker Jack Sanborn to a 1-year, $3.18 million deal, and the Bears could honestly sign him for even longer than this given how good of a player he has been. Even as a UDFA, he's been pretty good over the past 3 seasons working as a strong side backer in that backup role and having a good amount of tackles every single season, being pretty good against the run. He's a hard-hitting, hard-nosed dude. I think Dennis Allen is really going to love having him in this scheme, so I really want Jack Sanborn back. I hope Ryan Poles does as well. Next, I'll be re-signing cornerback Josh Blackwell to a 1-year, $1.125 million deal. Josh Blackwell has been very good as a depth cornerback on this team, has been very good on special teams. Last year, he did have the trick play punt return touchdown against the Packers in the final game of the season. So maybe working as a punt returner, he could stick on this team. Working as a backup cornerback, I think he has a lot of value to this roster. Another cornerback I'll be re-signing is Jalen Jones to a 1-year, $1.125 million deal. Kind of similar reasoning to signing back Josh Blackwell. He's a depth cornerback. The Bears need more depth cornerbacks. They need more guys that can play on special teams, and Jalen Jones can do both, so it makes a lot of sense to bring him back as well. And then lastly, I'll also be re-signing long snapper Scott Daly to a 1-year, $1.16 million deal. I would have loved to sign back Patrick Scales, but it seems like his time in the NFL might be over after a very injured season. Scott Daly played for the Bears for the majority of last season, so I'm just going to decide to bring him back. So after re-signings, we have $75,666,343 to spend in free agency. But first, I want to talk about some notable players that I let walk in free agency. So I let wide receiver Keenan Allen walk. I would have loved to have him back, but I think his price is going to be a little bit too high given his production last year. He was pretty good with Caleb Williams. Like, him and Caleb did have a good chemistry going, especially late in the season, but he is getting pretty old. He suffered an injury at the beginning of last season, and just with his injury history and his age, I don't think he's going to live up to the next contract the Bears will give him, so I'm deciding to let him walk. I'm also letting guard Tevin Jenkins walk. This one really does hurt because I've been a big Tevin Jenkins fan. I think he really embodies everything it means to be a Chicago Bear with his mentality, with how hard he works, every single game. But the problem with him is that he just can never stay healthy, and it seems like, according to his comments, he doesn't really have much interest in even returning to the Chicago Bears. It seems like he wants to go elsewhere, at least according to some comments he made in the offseason. So I would love to have him back, at a cheaper deal, but I don't think the Bears will sign him back because of the injury history and the fact that if you're not on the football field, it's kind of hard to rely on you. So the Bears will be letting him walk in my mock offseason. And I'm also letting starting center Coleman Shelton walk. He got better as the season progressed. He was actually pretty decent in some of the final games of the season, but he's way too inconsistent. His pass protection was very bad for the majority of last season. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to bring him back. But yeah, those are the players I let walk. But let's talk about free agency now. Which players am I going to go after with my signings? The Bears have a lot of money to spend, as you guys can see. And I think Ryan Poles will be a lot more aggressive in fixing the offensive line this time around. So let's begin. My first move is going to be signing center Drew Dalman to a 4-year, $56 million deal, $30 million guaranteed, first-year cap hit of $8.7 million. The Bears badly need to stop messing around at the center spot. I've been begging Ryan Poles to address the center spot with a long-term option for 3 years now, and he's not done it up to this point, which has made me really mad. Okay, the lack of having a true center on this team, a true starting caliber center, has held back the development of many quarterbacks, including Justin Fields, including even Mitch Trubisky. Before that, even Ryan Pace struggled to find a good center after Cody Whitehair, wasn't good anymore eventually. So I think Drew Dalman is the best center available on the marketplace. He had a pretty good season last year. He only played in 9 games due to injury. He suffered an ankle injury early in the season, but he came back and played very well after he came back. He's really, really good as a run blocker. He's getting better and better in pass protection every single season. He's only 26 years old, a very good scheme fit, I would think, in Ben Johnson's offense. So it just makes too much sense, guys. I'm done with going after cheap budget options. I want somebody that's actually proven to be good already in the NFL to play center in front of Caleb Williams, to help call the protections, to be a stable force in the interior of our offensive line that's going to help Caleb Williams develop as a passer. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Next up, it's a return of the Mac. I'm signing edge rusher Khalil Mack to a 2-year, $45 million contract, $40 million guaranteed, first-year cap hit of $17.1 million. And I'm not just doing this for nostalgia's sake, guys. Obviously, I'm a big Khalil Mack fan. I miss when he was on the Chicago Bears, but that's not the only reason why I think signing Khalil Mack makes sense. Okay, the Bears have a big need at edge too, especially after cutting DeMarcus Walker. We have a big hole at the edge spot on the other side of Montez Sweat, and Mack was one of the best edge rushers in all of football last year. He was one of the best run defenders, as he's always been throughout his entire career, but also in terms of rushing the passer, he had 49 total pressures, 7 sacks, was one of the better pressure generating edges in all of football last year. So even though he's 34 years old, even though obviously the age is a factor, he's still really damn good. He's been pretty durable recently, even into his mid-30s. And especially with how bad the Bears were against the run, the Bears need a better run defending edge rusher, and Khalil Mack is that. And as I mentioned, even rushing the passer, he's still pretty good. And he's already played in a 4-3 scheme before. He's also used to playing under Dennis Allen, because Dennis Allen was the head coach, I believe, when Khalil Mack got drafted to the Raiders during his first year. So already has some familiarity with the defensive coordinator. He already loves Chicago, as he has said in the past. The only question I have is if he's going to be okay with returning to Ryan Poles. When Ryan Poles, his first move ever was trading Khalil Mack, I wonder if Mack would take some offense to that. But I don't really think so, guys, because at this point, he's getting older. He just wants to go to a place where he's going to be appreciated, where he's going to get good playing time, and where he can win as well. And I think he can win in Chicago, okay? I mean, last time we acquired Khalil Mack, we had one of the best seasons in recent Chicago Bears history. So I think that could repeat itself this year in 2025. Going back to the offensive line, I'll be signing guard Kevin Zeitler to a 2-year, $13 million deal, $7 million guaranteed, first-year cap hit of $6.25 million. Kevin Zeitler was one of the best guards in all of football last year. The only reason why his price is going to be pretty low is because of his age. Okay, it's going to be 35 years old this upcoming season, which is pretty old. Okay, that's a very old guard I'm signing, but he's been pretty durable as of late. Okay, he played 16 games last season. He's played 15 plus basically every single season of his career. So knock on wood that continues, but he's been very healthy, very reliable. He's played in the NFL for 13 seasons, so has a lot of veteran knowledge, a lot of veteran experience to give to the rest of our offensive line, which our young guys could really use. Having a mentor like that's been a former Pro Bowler, that's also familiar with Ben Johnson. Okay, he played on the Lions last year, so he already has familiarity, with this current offensive coordinator, with the blocking scheme he's going to run here. I just think it makes too much sense, especially with how low his price is going to be. Okay, only coming at about, $7 million per year, $6.5 million per year. That is a steal for one of the better guards in football if he can stay healthy. Since I like Keenan Allen Walk, the Bears need some receiver help. I'm signing wide receiver Tutu Atwell to a 2-year, $7 million deal, $3 million guaranteed, first-year cap hit of $2.6 million. Now, I don't expect Tutu Atwell to replace Keenan Allen in his role. Obviously, that's not a rational thought, but the Bears already have 2 number 1 options, in my opinion, in DJ Moore and Rome Odunze. We don't need a third number 1 option. Okay, Super Bowl winning teams don't need 3 number 1 receivers to win a Super Bowl. They need 2 really, really good ones and 1 complimentary one at least. And Tutu Atwell would be a complimentary number 3 receiver. He could work in the slot. I think that Ben Johnson could devise a lot of ways to get the ball into his hands. And when he gets the ball into his hands, he's going to be gone because he's one of the fastest players in all of football. So I think adding a burner on this offense into to Atwell would be a good idea. He can work in the middle of the field. He's pretty small, only 5'9" and about 170 pounds, so not that big, but he is really tough. Like, he can take a hit. He had 562 yards last year working under Sean McVay on the Rams, so clearly is a good complementary piece in this league. I think signing him to a 2-year deal would be a great use of money for the Chicago Bears. Going back to the offensive line, I'm signing offensive tackle Cornelius Lucas to a 1-year, $5.8 million deal. The Bears need more help at the tackle spot. Currently, they only have Braxton Jones, Darnell Wright, and Kiran Amagaji under contract, so they need another guy. Larry Borom will not be coming back, and Cornelius Lucas is one of the best swing tackles in all of football. Every time he has to come in, he does his job. He can be a starting tackle at both left tackle and right tackle. He's played in this league since 2014. He was even on the Bears already in 2019. I think he would add some much needed depth on this offensive line at OT, especially with Braxton Jones coming back from an injury, season-ending injury last year, and sometimes Darnell Wright also deals with injuries too, so I think he would be a big upgrade at the swing tackle spot. Sticking with the offensive line again, I'm signing offensive guard Laken Tomlinson to a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. The Bears still need more help on the interior. We have very little interior players on the roster right now on the offensive line, so I'm signing another veteran who's been a pretty average starter as of late. He's been okay. He's not a very good starter, obviously, or elite or anything, but I think even adding average backup level depth is a big thing right now on this team, because the Bears have had some of the worst depth in all of football on the offensive line. So even though he's getting pretty old, he's going to be 33 years old this upcoming season. I think that adding a guy with a lot of veteran experience who already knows how to play football in this league is something the Bears really need on this offensive line. If you guys have noticed, I've added a lot of guys with veteran leadership on this offensive line. It's about time we have guys that actually know what they're doing on this offensive line in front of Caleb Williams. Going back to the receiver spot, I'm signing wide receiver Noah Brown to a 1-year, $3.3 million deal. The Bears need more depth at the receiver spot. Noah Brown is simply going to be a depth receiver, probably receiver number 5 or receiver number 6. So, probably not going to play a big role on the Bears, but he was the player that caught the Hail Mary against the Bears last year. So maybe he'll bring a little bit of luck with him to Chicago. And he's been fairly productive as a complementary piece on various offenses. He had 453 yards with the Commanders last year. Before that, he had 567 with the Texans. So as a complementary piece, he could be pretty good. He brings some height and some size to the wide receiver position for the Bears. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. So I think it would make sense for the Bears to sign him. And lastly, I'll be signing tight end Josiah DeGuara to a 1-year, $1.125 million deal. This is simply to be a backup tight end. The Bears need more backup tight ends on this roster. We really don't have anybody besides Cole Kmet right now. He's had experience playing with the Green Bay Packers, with the Jacksonville Jaguars under our now passing game coordinator Press Taylor last year. So I think that familiarity might bring him back to Chicago. He's not going to have a big role in this offense, probably besides blocking and catching the occasional pass, maybe as a tight end 3 on this offense. He can also play fullback too, probably. He has some experience playing that as well with the Green Bay Packers sometimes. So pretty low-key signing, but you need these depth guys to fill out your roster. So that wraps up free agency. After free agency, we have $25,424,743 to spend, and I'm pretty happy with the results of free agency. We got big upgrades in the trenches and also got some complimentary receivers as well as some other guys too. So I think I'd be pretty happy with the free agency like this. But let's get on to trades now. Okay, so I have one trade I have the Bears making in the offseason. So my only trade is going to be trading a 7th round pick number 235 in the draft this year, for defensive tackle Dalvin Tomlinson of the Cleveland Browns. Now you may ask, why would the Browns trade a pretty good interior defensive lineman for only a 7th round pick? It's because they're in big cap trouble and they're probably going to start to rebuild a little bit here. And there were rumors that they're going to cut Dalvin Tomlinson anyways. So instead of cutting him, getting a 7th round pick would still be better than doing that, getting something for him. I think the Bears could trade that 7th round pick instead of waiting for him to be cut, because it would guarantee he would be on the Bears roster. And if you look at Dalvin Tomlinson, he's 31 years old. He's been one of the best run defenders in football throughout his entire career with the New York Giants, with the Minnesota Vikings, with the Cleveland Browns. So with how bad the Bears' run defense was last year, I want to get more beefy guys on the inside to shore up that run defense. And even rushing the passer, he's been pretty solid. He had 3 sacks each of the last 2 seasons, which for a defensive tackle is pretty solid. If you look at his pressures, he had 36 of them. So pretty good all-around defensive tackle. The Bears need better starting quality players on this defensive line. You can never have too much depth. He would probably be a depth option on this team behind Gervon Dexter, behind Andrew Billings, but he would definitely rotate and get some playing time. The best defensive lines in football have multiple guys. They have 6, 7, 8 guys that can all start on the team at any given notice, while the Bears have only had a couple at any point in the last couple seasons. So adding another starting caliber player for only a 7th round pick would be a great deal by Ryan Poles. And the incoming cap hit would probably be around $5 million. I'd have to do the math more on that, but there's not too much guaranteed money left on Dalvin Tomlinson's deal, which is why he wouldn't be too expensive for the Chicago Bears. So after that trade, we have $20,424,743 to spend, but we're going to spend the rest of this money just on the incoming draft class and also keeping some for in-season emergency signings. So not going to be spending any more of it on any more players besides the incoming draft class. And speaking of the draft, guys, let's get into the NFL draft. So I'll talk about the picks the Bears have in the draft first of all. So looking at our draft picks, we have 1 pick in round 1, pick number 10. We have 2 in round 2, courtesy of the Carolina Panthers trade that we made in 2023, the gift that keeps on giving. We also have a 3rd round pick, a 5th round pick, and a 6th round pick via the Justin Fields trade. And remember, I traded away our 7th round pick for Dalvin Tomlinson. So plenty of high value picks to make an instant impact on this roster. Let's start with the NFL draft. With the 10th pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the Chicago Bears select offensive lineman Armand Membu out of Missouri. Now, I'm saying offensive lineman instead of tackle because I think he could play guard at the next level. He played tackle in college, and I think he could be a good tackle in the NFL too, but the Bears currently have a bigger need for him to play the left guard spot. I think he has the ability to switch over to guard with how powerful he is, with his agility, his athleticism, his ability to maul people on the football field. He could be a top level guard at the next level. And if he has to ever play at tackle, he could probably do that too because he has a lot of experience playing tackle in college football. So I think that having an offensive lineman with that versatility in Armand Membu would be a pretty good use of the number 10 pick. And Armand Membu has been a big riser throughout the draft process. Before, people thought he might be like a late round 1 pick, but if you turn on the tape, if you look at his testing, which he hasn't tested yet by the time I'm recording this video, but I expect him to test pretty well, this is going to be a pretty good pick for the Chicago Bears. He's only going to be 21 years old this upcoming season, and he has a lot of experience against SEC level competition. He was one of the best pass protectors in all of football last year, a dominant run blocker too. He has a mean streak to him. He's very agile, very good in lateral motion. He's a little bit on the shorter side in terms of his arm length, so that's probably why he could be a guard at the next level instead of tackle. But if he does have to fill in a tackle at some point for the Bears, he probably could do that too. So overall, I think this is the best offensive lineman that's going to be available on the board after Will Campbell presumably is going to be taken in the first 9 picks. And it would be a very good pick in my opinion for the Chicago Bears. With the 39th pick in the 2025 NFL draft, the Chicago Bears select edge rusher Princely Umanmielen out of Ole Miss. Princely Umanmielen was actually a former teammate of Gervon Dexter, and Gervon Dexter has tweeted about wanting the Bears to draft him, so it'd be pretty cool to reunite them on the same defensive line. And the reasoning behind this pick is that we simply need more help in the trenches. The Bears have had some of the worst trenches in football on both offensive and defensive line in the past couple seasons. So to fix that, you have to draft really high-level premium talent in the first couple rounds. And Princely Umanmielen is a very, very high upside player that, if developed properly, I think could be a star edge rusher in the NFL. He has very good size. He's 6'4", weighs 244 pounds, would be a perfect scheme fit in Dennis Allen's 4-3 scheme. And if you look at his production, he had 10.5 sacks last year. He had 7 before that and 4.5 the year before that. So getting better every single year, which really shows his work ethic and his progression as a football player. He's very, very athletic, has a very good first step. In terms of run defense, probably could improve there, but every player is going to have his flaws. He just has to work on that when he gets to the NFL level. But I think this would be a very solid pick at the beginning of round 2. With pick number 41 in the 2025 NFL draft, the Chicago Bears select running back Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. The Bears need a complimentary back to DeAndre Swift. DeAndre Swift could maybe be a budget version of Jahmyr Gibbs in this offense. I don't think he's anywhere close to as good as Jahmyr Gibbs, unfortunately, but regardless, Ben Johnson needs a power back, a guy that can be kind of the David Montgomery of this offense. I think that that's going to be Quinshon Judkins. Quinshon Judkins is a bruising physical back. He's also pretty athletic. If you look at his athletic testing, which just happened right now while I'm recording this video, he did very, very well. He ran a 4.48 40-yard dash, had really good agility testing, very good explosion testing as well. He's 6 foot tall, weighs 221 pounds, so definitely big enough to be, you know, that Dave Montgomery type of back in this offense. And like I mentioned, in the short yardage game, he's been very, very good for Ohio State. He finished off runs, he bulldozed people, he ran through people, he was very good at getting into the end zone, and the Bears need a back like that for Ben Johnson's offense to work. I think he could even take over as the RB1 of this offense instead of DeAndre Swift, because he does have the ability to be a bell cow back in the NFL. With pick number 72 in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select guard Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. I'm going back to the offensive line again, even though I've invested a lot in the O-line already this offseason. You can never have enough. O-line injuries happen all the time. You need quality backups, and Tate Ratledge could eventually take over for Kevin Zeitler when Kevin Zeitler's contract is over in Chicago. So this would be more of like a draft and develop type of player, and I think he has tremendous upside if you look at his tape. He played in the SEC. He won multiple championships there as a starter at right guard for 3 years. He was very nasty in the run game, mauling people in the run game, pretty good pass protector, and not an elite athlete or anything, but definitely good enough. He played against SEC level competition, some of the best players he had to go up against, and did pretty well against that competition. So I think that Tate Ratledge, if he has to start at any point in his rookie season because of a lot of injuries, he could take over and do pretty well, but most likely is going to be a draft and develop type of player that could start for the Bears in a couple years. And the Bears have rarely done things like this where they've taken offensive linemen and drafted, developed them before they actually start. Usually the O-line players we have taken have had to start right away because we have no depth whatsoever, but hopefully Ryan Poles can change that this year. With pick number 148 in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears select tight end Gunnar Helm out of Texas. The Bears have struggled to find an adequate tight end 2 on this offense for a long time. They've been trying to get guys on 1-year deals, and basically everybody have not really worked out under Ryan Poles. So I think that drafting one in the middle rounds in a very deep tight end class could be a good idea this year. Gunnar Helm has pretty good size. He's 6'5", weighs 231 pounds, so pretty quarterback friendly in terms of his catch radius. He has those long arms and that big body. Now, he's not very athletic. He tested very poorly at the combine, which is why I think he's going to be dropping to round 5, because if you look at his tape, I mean, he could have went in round 1 or round 2 if he tested better, because his tape is pretty solid. I mean, he makes a bunch of big time plays every single game. He was very good for Texas last season. He had 786 receiving yards, 7 receiving touchdowns, has pretty good hands, is a pretty good route runner. Again, not going to wow you with his speed or his athleticism, but as a pass catching, blocking tight end 2 that only is going to see the field occasionally in 12 personnel, I think he could be a good pick for the Chicago Bears. And then lastly, with pick number 197 in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Chicago Bears draft safety Dean Clark out of Fresno State. The Bears could still use more help at the safety spot, especially with how often Jaquan Brisker gets injured. With Kevin Byard getting older, they could use a safety to draft and develop a little bit behind those guys. And Dean Clark has dealt with a lot of adversity during his career. He actually tore his Achilles, I believe, and had surgery on it a couple years ago, but he fully recovered from that. He's been in college football since 2019, so definitely an older prospect, but a guy that's, you know, very hardworking. If you look at his film, very good tackler, very strong instinctual player in the box against the run. So I think as a backup safety, he could be a good value pick for the Chicago Bears. So after signing a rookie class, we have $10,459,634 in salary cap remaining. But now let's do extensions, okay? I will be extending one player on the Chicago Bears who I think really has deserved a contract extension. So I'll be extending cornerback Kyler Gordon to a 3-year, $33 million contract. Now the cap hit for this is going to take into effect in future years because this year is the last year of his rookie contract, so it won't impact the 2025 salary cap. But Kyler Gordon for sure has deserved a long-term extension on this team, especially after last season. Last season he started 15 games. He stayed pretty healthy throughout the season, which was a big knock on him early on in his career, but last season he stayed mostly healthy. He had 75 total tackles. He had 3 fumble recoveries. He had 4 tackles for loss. A lot of plays he made on the ball. He's a hard-hitting, instinctual guy, really good in coverage in that nickel cornerback spot. So it just makes too much sense to reward him with a long-term contract because he's been very good for the Bears. If we don't extend him right now, his price could become even higher in free agency next year. But there you have it, guys. That is the entire mock offseason. We still have about $10.5 million to spend, but this will be spent on emergency in-season signings and also signing our practice squad as well. So yeah, guys, let's go through the entire roster now after the offseason is over. So overall, I think this is a pretty solid roster. The quarterback stayed the same. At running back, I added Quinshon Judkins to hopefully be the David Montgomery of this offense and maybe even take over as RB1 eventually on this offense. At the receiver spot, I replaced Keenan Allen with Tutu Atwell and Noah Brown. And although both of them are not as good as Keenan Allen, we don't need a star receiver 3 on this team. We already have DJ Moore and Rome Odunze, so adding more depth at the receiver spot and then using that money that we would have spent on Keenan Allen on the offensive line instead, I think makes a lot more sense. I also added pieces in the tight end room. I drafted Gunnar Helm and signed Josiah DeGuara. If you look at the offensive line, big upgrades here. So I drafted Armand Membu to fill in at left guard. I signed Drew Dalman. I got Kevin Zeitler. So totally brand new interior. And if you look at the backups, they are much better too, in my opinion. I got Laken Tomlinson, Tate Ratledge, and also Cornelius Lucas, which if injuries happen, these will be much better players to back them up than we had last year. If you look at the defense, the defensive line is much better. I added Dalvin Tomlinson to be a great backup on the interior. I also added Khalil Mack at edge 2, return of the Mack. I also got Princely Uman-Mielen to be a backup at edge rusher. And then if you look at the linebackers and the cornerbacks and the safeties, barely anything changed here because I thought we already had, you know, good linebackers and secondary. I did add Dean Clark though at backup safety in the 6th round. But yeah, that is the entire mock offseason. Leave a comment down below. What did you guys like that I did? What would you guys do differently? Who are the top players you guys want to sign, trade for, draft? Let me know down below. Leaving a comment down below will definitely help spread this video out, so I appreciate if you guys would leave a comment. But yeah, thanks for watching. If you're still at this point in the video, thanks for watching all of this. It was a grind to put this all together, but this is the most fun video I do every season because it's fun to come up with just ideas for how the Bears could improve the roster. We're going to start getting free agency news on March 10th, so only about a week, you know, about 8 days until all of this starts to happen. So you know, it's going to be a fast-paced offseason. I hope the Bears make a lot of moves because it's about time we start winning football games here in the Windy City. We got Ben Johnson. We got Caleb Williams. We have so many playmakers on this team. It's time to start building the trenches and building a Super Bowl winning roster in Chicago. And obviously this year I'm not expecting to go to the Super Bowl, but at least making the playoffs this year should be a big must out of Ryan Poles and the Bears organization. Leave your comments down below, guys. As always, bear down.